After the assassination of the Prince Franz Ferdinand of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the German Empire declares war on Russia. Because of the established alliances, France is preparing for conflict, a few hours after the announcement of the general mobilization. German civilians living in France are asked to leave the country. Known as the Great War at the time, World War I was indeed the most disastrous war ever fought in history. Words are totally inadequate to describe the slaughter and statistics too cold to convey the human cost. 13 millions are estimated to have died on the battlefronts of Europe, about 1.5 million on the Western Front alone in the years 1916. The Russians lost 2.5 million killed, wounded, or taken prisoners in the year 1915. In one battle, Verdun, 700,000 lost their lives. That is 100,000 more than the total losses in the entire 4 years of the US Civil War. This was the war that began with the patriotic fervor on the part of both the soldiers marching off and their loved ones cheering them on. Some believed that the economic interdependency of European nations would compel governments to call off the war if it threatened to last more than 6 months. That was an assumption based on the belief that human beings were rational. Instead, as the cost of the war mounted, governments increased their demands upon the enemy with the thought that they had to compensate for the losses. Three examples of decisions that were made by the Treaty of Versailles is Article 32. Germany recognizes the full sovereignty of Belgium over the whole of the contested territory of Moresnet. Article 33. Germany renounces in favor of Belgium all rights and title over the territory of Prussia situated on the west of the road. The road will belong to Belgium where it bounds this territory. Article 39. The proportion and nature of the financial liabilities of Germany and Prussia with Belgium will have to bear an account of the territories ceded to her shall be fixed in conformity with Articles 254 and 256 of the present treaty. Consequences of the Treaty of Versailles. Crisis to Germany because the Treaty of Versailles blamed Germany for the First World War. As a result of this, Germany was also held accountable for the cost of the war, and the treaty dictated that compensation would have to be paid to the Allies. Extreme poverty, unemployment, hunger, dislocated families, human suffering on a scale not seen in America.
Causes of the Great Depression. Stock market crash of 1929, bank failures, American economic policy with Europe. Causes of totalitarian regimes. First, the humiliating treatment out to Germany by the Treaty of Versailles created a sense of hatred and revenge among the Germans. Secondly, the Treaty of Versailles greatly disappointed Italy. Though she fought on the side of the victors, she could not gain whatever had been promised to her during the war. On the other hand, Italy had to face poverty, discontent, and disorder.
Totalitarianism is a form of government in which one political party or group takes control over every aspect of the individual's life and all opposition is suppressed. The regime of Stalin was all over Russia and Ukraine. The totalitarian regime of the USSR was from 1928 to 1953, and it was called the Stalin era.
Stalin's regime was one of the most powerful in history, but one of the most bloody and murderous too. He was the dictator of the Soviet Union for 25 years since Lenin's death in 1924. His dictatorship caused terror among its people and the suffering of millions, but Stalin was one of the persons who helped to end the Nazi regime. Joseph Stalin was born on 18 December 1879 in Gori, Georgia, which was part of the Russian Empire by then, and he grew up in modest circumstances. He studied at a theological seminary where he read about Marxism and agreed with communist ideas. He never graduated. Instead, he joined the revolutionary forces against the Russian monarchy and spent 15 years as an activist. He later became one of the leaders of the Bolsheviks. In 1917, the Bolsheviks finally took power, but it was Lenin who became the leader of Russia until his death in 1924, when Stalin promoted himself as a political heir and then became the dictator of the Soviet Union. During his regime, he actually looked for economic growth and he was successful. There was a big increase in productivity caused by his program of rapid industrialization. However, during his period of time, Stalin exiled millions of people to slave labor camps and murdered even more because he thought they were enemies of the nation or that they would conspire against him or even said something bad about him or his regime. In 1941, he was prepared for Hitler's attack and finally got the victory, but at a great cost. A lot of people died. After World War II, the Soviet Union entered the nuclear age and ruled over an empire which included the most of Eastern Europe. Stalin died of a stroke on 5th March 1953.
The Soviet Union inherited an underdeveloped economy from Tsarist Russia. Over the course of nearly 70 years, the USSR developed into one of the world's largest industrial powers. The Soviet government controlled virtually all aspects of the national economy. The Soviet economy was directed by a government ministry known as Gosplan. This ministry designed plans to achieve broad objectives for economic growth set by the state. These plans, known as five-year plans, came to be a model for many other communist nations, like Chinese government. The Soviet government controlled all of the country's foreign trade. The USSE generally pursued a policy of self-sufficiency, limiting its amount of foreign trade. Traditionally, the bulk of Soviet Union's trade was with other communist countries. The Soviet Union provided large amounts of economic aid to other communist countries to the world developing nations. Soviet aid was especially important to the Cuban, Mongolian, and Vietnamese economy.
Stalin said his ideologies were based in Marxism-Leninism and the theory of socialism in one country. He described this ideology as Orthodox Marxism. Essentially, this ideology became the official one of the Soviet Communist Party and stayed under Stalin. The use of the term dictatorship can cause confusion, but some historians claim it was a logical outcome of both Marxism theory and Leninist practice. However, although Marx used the phrase dictatorship of the proletariat to describe political rule under a socialist worker state, he did not mean a harsh and repressive regime.
Human rights violated. 21st. Right to democracy. 22. Right to social security. 7. We are equal before the law. 9. No unfair detainment. 19. Freedom of expression. 20. Right to public assembly. Well, as we know, Stalin started one of the largest known genocides by man.